Norman's Revenge: A Tale of Garden Gnomes. The sun was setting over Greenfield, casting a warm orange glow over the quiet suburban streets. In a small garden on Elm Street, a group of mischievous garden gnomes were gathered around their leader, Gnorman. Gnorman, a stout gnome with a bright red hat and a bushy white beard, was addressing his troops. "Friends, we have a problem," he said, his voice low and serious. "A new gardening store has opened across the street, and I fear it spells trouble for our way of life." Gnorman continued, "This store is run by a man named Mr. Grimstone. He's a ruthless businessman who cares little for the well-being of garden creatures like us." "What can we do, Gnorman?" asked a young gnome named Blinky. Norman's eyes twinkled with mischief. "We'll show him that gnomes won't be pushed around. We'll play some pranks on his store, and teach him to respect our garden home." Meanwhile, across the street, Mr. Grimstone was watching the gnomes from the window of his store. His eyes narrowed as he smiled to himself. "Those pesky gnomes think they can outsmart me. I'll show them what it means to cross Mr. Grimstone." The war for the garden had begun. The next morning, Mr. Grimstone stormed out of his store, his face red with rage. "You pesky gnomes," he shouted, shaking his fist at the garden across the street. "I'll get you for this. Mark my words." That night, under the light of a full moon, Mr. Grimstone unleashed his drones on the garden. The gnomes, caught off guard, scrambled to defend their home. "We need to get inside the store and shut down the drone controller," Gnorman shouted above the din of battle. Blinky, the young gnome, piped up, "I can sneak in through the air vent. I'm small enough." The battle for the garden had reached its climax. He dropped down into the store's control room, surrounded by rows of humming computers. A single screen displayed a countdown, drone deployment sequences on a trio fi. "You meddling little pest," Mr. Grimstone snarled, grabbing Blinky by the collar. Blinky struggled to break free, but Mr. Grimstone's grip was like a vice. "Let him go, you scoundrel," Norman shouted, brandishing his pointed red hat. The gnomes charged at Mr. Grimstone, using their tiny fists to pummel his knees. With a triumphant shout, he slapped the button, and the drones outside ground to a halt. The countdown screen froze at 0-1. "You may have won this battle," Mr. Grimstone sneered, "but you'll never escape my garden prison." The gnomes frantically searched for an escape route, but every door led to a dead end. Mr. Grimstone cackled with glee, confident that his security system had them cornered. "We need to think outside the box," he said, his eyes twinkling with mischief. The gnomes huddled together, brainstorming a plan. The gnomes cheered as they set to work, using the robotic lawn mowers and pruning shears to cut through the security cables. The store's alarms blared as the gnomes made their escape, dodging laser beams and leaping over obstacles. As they made their way back to their secret garden home, they were greeted with cheers from the other garden creatures. The gnomes had saved the day, and their legendary pranks would be told for generations to come. Mr. Grimstone's gardening store was abandoned, a relic of his failed attempt to rid Greenfield of its beloved garden gnomes. The gnomes celebrated long into the night, their laughter and music carrying on the wind.
Thank you for watching, thanks for watching my short story.